Lloyd?
Yeah, this is me. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and I'm calling from Congressman Gardener's office. How are you?
You're calling from his office?
From his office, that's correct.
Awesome. Carolyn,
Awesome, yes.
so what's going on?
Well, I just had some questions about fiat currency for us, and I just wanted to pass just a message along to you. Unfortunately, Congress doesn't really have much control over monetary policy. That's handled really by the Federal Reserve. But I'm happy to pass a message along to the Congressman should any legislation pertaining to monetary policy arise, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions you might have as well.
Okay. So it's Ron Paul agrees with the gold standard, and that's pretty clear. He makes that pretty clear. Has Cory Gardeners made that clear on his stance?
Not to me. To the best of my knowledge, we have never had that discussion with the Congressman. I don't believe he's ever expressed an opinion on it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting because this fiat currency has been admitted to being a fraud. George Washington said that if we would ever happen to stumble again upon unfunded paper money, or any other species of fraud, that it would enter the body of politics like spirit liquors enters the body, killing the vitals, destroying the vitals. And so, and then another banker said that every American will be a contributor to this fraud we will call social insurance, which gives this fiat paper currency value. Did you know that?
I was not aware of those quotes, sir.
Yes. The reason why, ma'am, is because whenever there's a fraud, there's always deceit. And there's always ignorance and a lack of knowledge. And this fiat currency, John Adams, he said, all perplexity, distress, and confusion that arise in America are not from defects in the Constitution or Confederation, but in the downright ignorance of the nature of coin and its circulation. He said, clear up the money problem, and all seemingly unrelated problems will simply vanish. You see, that's the problem with our money system, is that people don't understand it. The dollar that we use and the dollar that Cory Gardeners uses to fund these programs, these government programs, are created out of nothing. They're counterfeited at the expense of our children. Because when we file a birth certificate, that is now collateral for more borrowing. And so what happens is whenever a congressman or senator want to pass a law and create more government, they have no gold, so they can live within their means. So now what they do is they create money out of nothing, borrow it from the Federal Reserve, and then throw our children into the fire of debt. So that's why this is such an important issue, because that's why we're trillions of dollars in debt, because we are no longer on the gold standard. Because what would happen if we were on a gold standard is once the government ran out of gold, they would have to simply wait until they had more gold, till they could fund any more government. But what they do to continue to fund this government is they borrow money that was created out of nothing at the expense of our children. And that's really the heart of the issues of all the country's problems right now. And Thomas Jefferson said that if we would fund our present generation at the expense of the future generation, this is called swindling on a large scale. And it's a fraud because whenever you sign your name to the Social Security card, you are giving up your rights and you are accepting privileges offered by the international bankers who we are bankrupted to. That's why it's such a touchy subject, because The congressmen simply want to take care of the people. They want to, meet their needs and say, oh well, I'm going to do great things for you, and I'm going to make it safe for you, and then they borrow all of this money at the expense of our children, and our children have $17 trillion to pay. And
absolutely, and Congressman Gardener is extremely concerned about that national debt.
Okay. The only way we can take care of that is if we go back to a gold standard. Because, and that would do away with the Federal Reserve. But the problem is that even Ronald Reagan said the Federal Reserve is held accountable to nobody, not even the president. And then President Clinton, he said that when you find yourself as a leader of the nation, you find out you can have virtual presidents, virtual prime ministers, virtual everything. You find out someone else is making the decisions. Ron Paul wanted to ask the Federal Reserve some questions, and they told Ron Paul, well, you're on a need-to-know basis. If we think you need to know, then we'll tell you. You see, the Federal Reserve is controlling this country, and leaders love their fiat currency, because that's how they take care of the whining and complaining of the people at the expense of our children. And there's a lot of us out there who don't like that. We like our forefathers, and we like the gold standard because it keeps government within bounds. Thomas Jefferson said, if I could add one amendment to the Constitution, it would be to keep the government from borrowing. I would depend upon this alone to keep the government within the confines of the Constitution. So what happens is this fiat currency, this fake money that is borrowed at the expense of our children, funds out of bounds governments, and our government's out of bounds, ma'am. We're bankrupted. The Social Security card and the birth certificate are instruments of bankruptcy. This whole country, whenever you use those documents, you are in the bankruptcy of the United States, and there is no law that says you have to have a birth certificate. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah. I called Ron at Vital Statistics in Denver, Colorado, and I asked him, I said, do you have to fill out the birth certificate when your child is born? And he kept repeating the law over and over because it's a trick. And I wasn't buying into his trick, and I said, okay, Ron, I guess I'm going to have to word this in another way. Would I be lying if I said you don't have to fill it out? And he finally said, Dwayne, you are right. There is no law that says you have to fill out a birth certificate, and the birth certificate police won't come after you, but your child just won't be able to go to school. And the first thought that came to my mind, well, my school is run by the state, which is not telling us the truth about this fiat currency that is destroying our country, and it's not telling us the truth. So I don't want my child to grow up being taught by a system that is not teaching my child the truth. What do you think?
Well, I think that Congressman Gardener would certainly, as I said before, agree that it is irresponsible to leave America's children with such a massive burden of debt.
Right.
And I know that he is very open to exploring solutions to achieve that, and I'll certainly make sure that he's aware of your support for returning to the gold standard.
Yes, it is very important. That is Constitution, but the Constitution also allows for people to contract. And so what has happened is this entire country is in contract with the bankruptcy, and they've been tricked into it. Do you know that when you sign the Social Security card, you enter into the jurisdiction of a bankrupted country that now has control over your property, and they can tell you and charge you fees on your own property, including yourself, on your income?
I guess that's what it means when you get that Social Security number.
That is a system of bankruptcy, ma'am. That is destroying our country. Our country was founded where we were the sovereign people of the country. John Jay in 1793, he was a Supreme Court judge, And he said, at the revolution, sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country. So we ruled the government. Governments are established by men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. See, our founders, we established the government. But what happened is this government became bankrupt and they established the citizen, which is now under their power. You see, the government, when our country was founded, was under our power. But now the government, now the citizen is under the government's power because this whole country is bankrupted. Does that make sense?
Sir, and I'll certainly be sure to pass that message along.
That's pretty heavy-duty knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, very philosophical conversation today.
Yes, we give up our sovereignty whenever we sign that Social Security card because we enter into bankruptcy. And the fraud is that you never told us that. Your government never told us that we're giving up our rights, and you never told us that we don't have to sign it, and you never told us the intricate details of this system. You guys tricked us into it. And that's what we don't like. We don't like to be tricked.
No, and Congressman Gardeners certainly doesn't like to be tricked either.
So if I was you, I would start studying our money system because it's a fraud. George Washington said it was. And even Edward Mandell House in 1913 said it was a fraud. He said that we would have to register our children in a national system designed to keep track of the people that we will be a chargeback for their fiat currency, and that we will have to give up our rights for privileges. And he said they will have to partake in this fraud we will call social insurance, because we were never told the full details. And that's what, there's millions of people that don't agree with it because people are homeless now. They're losing their houses, they're homeless. Then when you end up homeless, there's no place to go. And if you want to try to buy some land, and when you don't have any work, you're not working, then the government makes you enter into their black hole of bankruptcy to get permits and fees and all this stuff to build a house on land that is yours. See how our rights have been taken? And we were never told. And that's not fair. Do you think it's fair?
No, I think that certainly children who are born into a system that is not fiscally viable are going to be getting a bad deal.
Well, I know that I ended up on the street and my government arrested me twice for it because I had no place to live. And I didn't think that was fair because I was working and I got laid off from 3 jobs in a row in 2008. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's certainly extremely unfortunate, and hopefully your employment situation is better now.
Ma'am, Thomas Jefferson warned us about the Federal Reserve. He said, "The central bank is an institution of the most deadly hostility existing against the forms and principles of our Constitution. If the American people ever allow a private bank to issue our currency, our children will wake up homeless on the continent that their fathers conquered." You see, that was a boundary that our forefathers set for us to determine what the Constitution really meant. And John Adams, he said, "Separate not text from historical background. If you do, you will have perverted and subverted the Constitution, and you will end up with an illegitimate, bastardized form of government." So what happened is the courts and the people, they try to squeeze out of the text of the Constitution what they can do and how they can get away from the laws of the Constitution and the principles, and then they end up with the central bank, the one that our forefathers broke away from. Benjamin Franklin said, "Probably the prime cause for the revolution is that King George III would not allow the colonies to an honest money system." So, because King George III was making them borrow money with interest to be paid that could never be paid back because it was never created and put into the money supply. And that's the very system that we have today. And Americans are not in agreement with this because it's creating homelessness, it's creating government control, it's creating oppression. Because now you can't go buy land and you can't build a house freely. Now you have to have a job working for Wall Street somewhere because that's all that's available, because Wall Street is really controlling this country. And they designed it to hurt every man in America and their private business, and to gain a monopoly on the money and all commerce. And that's what's happening in this country today because of this fiat currency that we have.
Well, I certainly appreciate those insights, sir, and I will absolutely be able to pass them along to the Congressman. As always, feel free to call us or reach out to our district offices if we can ever be helpful. But it was great talking to you, and I'll absolutely make sure the Congressman receives your
All right.
thoughts.
Well, ma'am, I do have another concern. Where I live in Garden City, I've been talking with the people here, and they don't answer my questions. Are they obligated to answer my questions? Because they're not answering my questions, and I don't
I'm
like
sorry,
that.
So which people?
Garden City.
In Garden City. I'm not sure.
That's next to Greeley.
Okay, so they should be able to answer your questions at our Greeley office. They are obligated to serve the constituents, so they try to be as helpful as possible. But if for some reason they're unable to answer your question, you can always call us here in Washington.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much, sir. Have a good one.
You too.